Story 14, the story of Jacob's ladder, continues the account of Jacob, now immediately following the great deception of his father Isaac. Now Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. And Esau said in his heart, "When my father dies and the days of mourning for him are over, I will kill my brother Jacob." Rebekah heard Esau, her older son, say this. So she sent for Jacob, her younger son, and said to him, "Listen, your brother Esau is consoling himself by planning to kill you. Now listen to me. Run away to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him until your brother's anger goes away. When your brother stops being angry at you and he forgets what you have done to him, I will send for you." Then Rebekah went to Isaac and said, "If Jacob marries one of the Hittite women, like Esau had done, like the ones who married Esau, why should I go on living?" So Isaac called Jacob, blessed him, and urged him, saying, "Do not look for a wife among the Canaanites. Go to Paddan Aram, to Bethuel, your grandfather. Marry someone from your uncle Laban's family. May God Almighty bless you with many children and give you the blessing of Abraham, so that you and your family inherit the land that God gave to Abraham." Then Isaac sent Jacob to Paddan Aram to live with Laban. Esau later married Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael. Esau, who already had two wives from among the Canaanites, now takes yet another wife, a daughter of Ishmael, the son of Abraham by the servant girl of Sarah, when they thought they were helping God by kind of taking matters into their own hands to provide for themselves a descendant. But he was not to be the promised descendant, and God would take care of that himself in sending them Isaac. Of course, Esau is upset, as you well might expect him to be. And perhaps not surprisingly, we even find out that he's plotting to kill Jacob once Isaac is dead and gone. And so, Rebekah tells Jacob to prepare, to go back home, if you will, back to where she had come from, back to her brother Laban, and there he was told to find a wife for himself. And Isaac, in his last days, agrees to this plan, and so sends Jacob off. Jacob traveled from Beersheba toward Haran. Stopping at one place to spend the night, he took a stone, put it down for his pillow, and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. The angels of God were ascending and descending on it. The Lord stood above it and said, "I am the Lord God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. I will give to you and your descendants the land on which you lie. Your descendants shall be as numerous as the dust on the earth, and they will spread abroad to the west, east, north, and south. Through you and your descendants shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Now listen, I am with you. I will keep you everywhere you go, and I will bring you again to this land. I will not leave you." Jacob awakened from his sleep and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." Then Jacob rose up early in the morning, took the stone that he had put down for his pillow, set it up for a pillar, and poured oil on top of it. He named that place Bethel. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, "If God will be with me and keep me in the way that I go, and give me bread to eat and clothes to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then shall the Lord be my God, and this stone which I have set up as a pillar shall be God's house. I will surely give you, Lord, 1/10 of all you give me." So Jacob has this dream, and we sometimes call this account the Jacob's ladder. And he sees this vision, and there's this stairway with messengers or angels kind of ascending and descending. But at the top, It's God, the Lord himself, the one we will know later as Yahweh. And he speaks to Jacob, and he repeats the promises that he had made to Abraham and then to Isaac, and now he makes them to Jacob, the promise that his descendants will one day inherit this very land. And Jacob acknowledges that this is a message from God and that he has received the blessing and the promise once given to his father and his father's father, Isaac and Abraham. Then Jacob continued his journey and came to the land of the eastern people. He saw a well in a field with 3 flocks of sheep lying nearby, because the shepherds watered their flocks from the well. A great stone covered the well's mouth. Jacob said to the shepherds, "My brothers, where are you from?" They said, "We are from Haran." He said to them, "Do you know Laban, Nahor's son?" "We know him," they replied. "Is he well?" Jacob asked. "He is well," they said. "Rachel, his daughter, is coming with his sheep." When Jacob saw Rachel with the sheep, he rolled the stone from the well's mouth and helped water the flock. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and, crying with joy, told her that he was her father's nephew, Rebekah's son. She ran and told her father. When Laban heard the news, he ran to meet him, embraced him, kissed him, and brought him to his house. Jacob finally makes it back to what we might call Rebekah, his mother's original home, where she had grown up, and actually meets her brother there, Laban, the character we met a story or two ago. And so again, God had seen Jacob safely there and had now brought him into contact with Laban's family, and specifically with his daughter Rachel. And we'll continue with that story as we read on. Now, in our next story, the story of Jacob and Laban, we're going to learn a little bit more about Laban. And it's kind of interesting, and maybe not just the least bit ironic, that Jacob, who had deceived and maybe been way less than truthful with his father, now deals with another one, Laban, who doesn't prove to be very trustworthy. Now when Jacob had lived with Laban a month, Laban said to Jacob, "Just because you are my relative, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me, what should I pay you?" Now Laban had 2 daughters. The older one was named Leah, and the younger one was named Rachel. Leah had little sparkle in her eyes, but Rachel was lovely and had a beautiful figure. Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, "I will work for you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter." Laban said, "It is better that I give her to you than to another man. Stay with me." So Jacob worked 7 years for Rachel. The years seemed like a few days because he loved her so much. At the end of the 7 years, Jacob said to Laban, Give me Rachel as my wife, for I have worked the years I promised. I want to marry her." So Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. But he took Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he married her. Laban also gave a servant, Zilpah, to Leah. When Jacob discovered he had married Leah, he said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? Didn't I work for you to get Rachel as my wife? Why have you tricked me?" Laban said, "In our country we do not give the younger in marriage before the older. Finish the marriage week with Leah, and I will give you Rachel for another 7 years of service." So Jacob worked another 7 years. Then Laban gave Rachel his daughter to him as his wife. Laban also gave Bilhah, a servant, to Rachel to be her maid. Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah. So Jacob, who had tricked and deceived his father, has the tables turned on him just a bit. And it may seem very, very odd for us. How could this ever have happened? How could Jacob not have known that it was but their marriage practices and customs were much different, and the bride may well have been veiled in such a way that Jacob could not necessarily be sure of who it was until perhaps that night or sometime during that day when he and his bride would have come together for the first time and become a married couple in every sense of the word. And that's when Jacob discovered the deceit. Laban tries to make an excuse, saying, well, look, Jacob, that's just not how it's done here. The older daughter has to be married before the younger daughter can be married. So just take Leah as your first wife, and then work another 7 years, and you can have Rachel as a wife as well. And so that's ultimately what Jacob has to end up doing, as Laban kind of pulled a bit of a fast one on Jacob. The Lord gave Jacob 12 sons. We might say 12 sons in all. When the Lord saw that Leah wasn't loved, he gave her children, while Rachel had none. Leah became the mother of Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Rachel became jealous of Leah and gave her servant Bilhah to Jacob to have children. Bilhah, Rachel's servant, was the mother of Dan and Naphtali. Leah in turn gave her servant Zilpah to Jacob to have children. Zilpah, Leah's servant, was the mother of Gad and Asher. Then Leah gave birth to Issachar and Zebulun, as well as a daughter, Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel, and she gave birth to Joseph. Years later, Rachel gave birth to Benjamin. So Jacob has 2 wives, and each of them have a special servant, which they in turn share with Jacob so that he can have more children by them. It was a different world back then, and having children was one of the ways that a family saw themselves as being blessed. So while Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah, Leah was blessed with children. And then the servants come into play, and then Leah some more children, and then finally Rachel gives birth to Joseph. Much later she will also give birth to Benjamin. This isn't the necessary pattern. God isn't trying to say, hey, this is how it should be done. Again, things were much different back then, and it's probably the type of thing that perhaps Jacob should not have done. However, God is at work through Jacob and through his wives and his wives' servants. And he does finally bless Jacob with a total of 12 sons, and that number 12 is kind of significant. These are the sons, or we might say descendants, or maybe even children of Jacob. After Rachel had borne Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Let me leave so that I may return to my own country. Let me take my wives and my children, for whom I have served you, and let me go. You know the work I have done for you." Laban said to him, "Please stay. I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake. Tell me what wages you want, and I will pay it." Laban making a promise here. Jacob would probably be wise to be on his toes. Jacob said to him, "You know I have served you well, and that your flocks and herds have increased. The Lord has blessed you since my coming. When can I work for my own family?" Laban said, "What shall I give you?" Jacob said, "Don't give me anything. Do this for me instead, and I will take care of your flocks. Today let me take all the speckled and spotted cattle, all the brown sheep, and the spotted and speckled goats. These will be mine. You'll know I am honest or not, because if you see any white animals, you know I have stolen them." So Laban agreed. For 6 years Jacob worked for Laban, receiving strong cattle, sheep, and goats in return. Jacob became rich and had many cattle, camels, and servants. Laban and his sons became jealous of Jacob because of his wealth. Then the Lord said to Jacob, "Return to the land of your fathers and to your family. I will be with you." Now, this particular story doesn't capture this, but over the years, when Laban saw Jacob's flocks growing more rapidly than his own, Laban would kind of change the deal and say, "No, Jacob, I will keep the spotted ones," or I will keep those. And then suddenly the patterns would change, and Jacob would continue to do better. And it was God's hand at work, confounding Laban's plans to take advantage of Jacob, and taking care of Jacob, blessing him and preparing him for his eventual return back to his home in Canaan, where his brother Esau still lived. So Jacob called Rachel and Leah, came out to the fields, and said to them, "I see your father does not look at me as he used to. The God of my fathers has blessed me. You know that I have worked hard for your father, and your father has deceived me, changing my wages 10 times. But God has not let him hurt me. God has told me to leave this land and return to the land of my family." Rachel and Leah said to him, "Whatever God has said to you, do." Then Jacob got everything ready to go to Canaan, where his father Isaac lived. He put his sons and his wives upon camels, and he moved away all the cattle and all the property that he had gotten. When Laban went to shear his sheep, Jacob left without telling him. 3 days later, Laban, when he was told that Jacob had left, took some relatives and pursued him for 7 days. They overtook him at Mount Gilead. When they met, Laban said to Jacob, "Why did you leave secretly and take my daughters as if they are captives? I could have sent you away with a celebration filled with songs. You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren. How foolish! I could harm you, but the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, 'Be careful not to speak either good or bad to Jacob.' Then Jacob and Laban made a covenant with each other, asking God to watch over them while they were absent from each other. Then Laban kissed his grandsons and his daughters, blessed them, and returned to his home. As Jacob continued on his journey, the angel of the Lord met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, 'This is the camp of God.' He named the place Mahanaim. So after years up in Haran, after adding to his family and to his flocks, God tells Jacob, it's time to go home. It's time to return to the land of Isaac, your father, to the lands of Esau, your brother. And so Jacob prepares his family to do that, and Rachel and Leah and their servants as well agree that they too will go. They slip away from Laban because Jacob knows Laban well enough to know that if he was aware of it, he probably would have tried to interfere and may well have messed things up. Laban does track them down, chase them, but we're told that God had spoke to him and warned him not to intervene. And so finally, Jacob and the rest of his family and his sons and wives and their servants, they begin to make their way back south, as it were, headed back toward the land that Jacob had left so many years earlier.